Our reading from the Gospel this morning is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. Bless you. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him, "Again, it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, "All this I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. Word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. For this Lenten season, we will be thinking about the wildernesses in our lives and how they form us as individuals and as a community of faith. I don't know about you, but when I think of a wilderness, I think of some place that lacks the basic necessities of life: water, food, and shelter. I think of desolation. I think of wide open spaces of deserts. But some wildernesses are abundant in those things: food, water, shelter. Take the Boundary Water Canoe area in northern Minnesota and southern Ontario. More than 150 miles of wooded, watery wilderness. More than 1 million acres of wilderness. And yet, that wilderness is full of water to drink, berries to forage, and fish to catch. On the website of the United States Forest Service, it says this about the Boundary Waters Canoe area: this wilderness offers freedom to those who wish to pursue an experience of expansive solitude, challenge, and personal integration with nature. That's a rather different view of being in the wilderness than we likely think of when we hear this story of Jesus' time in the wilderness. I don't know about you, but I never thought about it as a time of freedom. I have only ever thought about it as being a wilderness of trial and testing. Wilderness of freedom. Freedom for those who wish to pursue and experience expansive solitude, challenge, and a personal integration with nature. On the one hand, we think of ourselves as being free, that we pretty much can do whatever it is we wish to do, that we can all openly come here and worship God in our own way without fearing vandalism or reprisal. And while we know that is true for us, we also know that that is not true for all who seek to worship in the way that is their own, in the way that is true of us. We are free to go out to eat or go home to eat, to drive our car or to walk to work, to send our children to public schools or private schools or home schools, to play sports, to express what we think in word or song. Basically, we are free to do whatever we want to do. On the other hand, we know that we really are not all that free. We have obligations we must meet. There are rules that we must follow. There are laws and courts to enforce compliance. There are bills that must be paid. There are jobs that we have to go to in order to pay those bills and keep our families fed and sheltered. And then there are the laws of nature. They're laws that we simply cannot breach. Or if we do so at our own danger. So, did Jesus go to the wilderness at the prompting of the Spirit, the wind in the wilderness? Did Jesus go in order to be free? To be free of the pressures and responsibilities of the world? Or did he go to pursue an experience of expansive solitude, of challenge, of personal integration with nature? If there is only one thing that we need other than water, shelter, and food, that need is almost impossible to attain in our living daily. It is solitude. Even a little bit of solitude. And we certainly don't have time in our daily living for an expansive solitude. Our temptation is to be so scheduled as to avoid the necessity of being alone, so as to be able to hear the wind of God as it blows through the wilderness of our lives. None of us needs to be as busy as we are. None of us need to be as busy as we are. There is nothing that says we must do all the things that we say we have to do. We choose to be overscheduled, to be always busy, to always have someplace else to go, to always be active. We choose to avoid solitude. So why not look at Lent this year as a choosing of solitude? A time to get away from the busyness, to take time to go to the wilderness, and to seek the freedom of finding solitude. The story tells us that Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. Can you imagine that? 40 days and 40 nights, all by yourself, no one else around. 40 days and 40 nights alone with oneself, with only the pressure being to experience an expensive solitude, an expansive challenge, and an expansive integration with nature. Somehow it seems that nature always wins, and after 40 days and 40 nights, Jesus was hungry. 40 days with no food? That's one way to keep from having to do the dishes. Jesus was free to take food with him. He could have packed 40-bag lunches. Jesus was free to hunt for food. But in his freedom, he chose to fast. Perhaps he felt that in fasting, he would find it not to be an impediment, but rather, in fasting, he would more fully experience the wilderness and the solitude and the challenge and the nature, that he would experience the wind in the wilderness. Just as that wind in the wilderness had lit that fire for Moses to see at the burning bush, just as that wind in the wilderness had produced a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire to lead the people through the promised land, that in his wilderness, Jesus would discover the presence of the Spirit in his own life, and that fasting was formative. And maybe he realized that fasting and eating both could be formative. And no one can doubt the place of meals in his ministry. As so often happens, that really good thing we have chosen becomes a temptation. That really good thing takes over our life, so that all we're interested in is that really good thing. And in essence, that really good thing becomes that thing that we fall down and worship. And Jesus says, it's written, worship the Lord your God alone. Jesus chose not to eat. So it is not surprising that when he was tempted, that it would be about eating. What in our own lives? What choice have we made has turned from a blessing into a temptation and perhaps a curse? It seems to me that Jesus could have chosen to turn that stone into a loaf of bread. What harm would that have been? After 40 days and 40 nights, it really would have been a rather insignificant thing. It wouldn't have counted for much, and who would ever know? Isn't that the way we think often? That just this one time won't make any difference, and no one will know anyway, and besides, I really want this, and it's a really good thing, and I need this. It's amazing how easily wants turn into needs, isn't it? And just think, he could have turned all those stones into bread and fed the entire world. Wouldn't that have been great? If we're not good at solitude, and I would say that most of us are not good at solitude, we are really good at rationalization. And all of us are really good at rationalization. We can rationalize almost anything. In the story Mary read from Genesis, Eve was able to rationalize eating from that forbidden tree. Adam was able to rationalize joining her. What could possibly be wrong from eating just one tree? It looked good, smelled good. I'm sure it tastes good. And think of all the good that would be if I was wise, if I knew the difference between good and evil. Wilderness is a place which provides the freedom to those who wish to pursue experiences of solitude, challenge, and nature. In other words, being in the wilderness is not something to fear. It is something to embrace. It is not something to overcome. It is something to live through. Wilderness is seldom, perhaps never, easy. In fact, wilderness can be a dangerous place. Imagine had Jesus jumped off that bell tower of the temple. Imagine what kind of a splash that would have made. What a way to kick off his ministry. He would have been an instant star. His popularity would have been amazing. But what of later? When people forgot his grand entrance and demanded another sign. How do you top jumping from the top of the Empire State Building and being caught by a band of angels? Where does one go from there? Had he jumped, not only would he have fallen for the temptation, but he would have denied the laws of nature. His denial of the law of gravity very well would have been copied by others with far different results. Instead of becoming integrated with nature, he would have used nature for his own ends. He would have extended freedom to the breaking point that once crossed can never be fully restored again. In being free of the natural order, he would have become enslaved to the tempter. Are we primarily integrated with nature, or are we segregated from it? Do we misuse nature for our own desires? Do our actions work against nature or in support of nature? Or do we, as the first couple were invited to do, take care of nature? Are we turning nature into parking lots and clean air into unbreathable smog? The wilderness offers the freedom to be integrated with nature. There are no motors allowed in the Boundary Water Wilderness. There are no campsites for buses and motorhomes. You can't drive your motorcycle into it or your big recreational vehicle. You have to walk and stay on the path and carry your canoe with you and your food, and you have to carry it back out again to be fully integrated with nature. I wonder what we would look like and what Earth would look like if we always sought integration rather than domination. The wilderness offers freedom. Freedom to pursue an experience of expansive solitude, challenge, and personal integration with nature. The first couple lost freedom and chose to listen to a viper instead of the wind. Whereas Jesus found the freedom to be open to that wind, to be formed for ministry, to find courage, to be his best self, to not give in to the whims of power, prestige, and popularity. He was fortified for the challenge and formed by the challenge. And so it can be for us. If we will be open to the wind of God, God's transforming spirit, when we find ourselves in the wildernesses of life. 40 days and 40 nights, formed by the wind in the wilderness, so that when he had that triumphal moment as he walked into Jerusalem, all that popularity. And on Friday, he faced death willingly. That's to be formed in the wilderness. May God be with us these 40 days of Lent. Our hymn of discipleship is "Come and Find a Quiet Center." As we move towards the table of our Lord, we center our lives in small and large ways, looking for our own place in the midst of nature and challenge and lack of solitude. Let's stand together as we sing.